Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Assaying Refining Conference Wrap-Up webinar. Joining us today, we have Neil Harby, Chief Technical Officer at LBMA, and Michael W. Hinds, Consultant at MHinds Analytical Consulting Incorporated. So before we begin today, I just want to remind you that if you have any questions during the webinar, you can submit these using the Q&A function, which you can find at the bottom of your screen. So, without further ado, I shall hand over to Neil to begin the webinar. Over to you, Neil.
Okay, thank you, Tamsin. What myself and Mike would like to talk about today is really the Assaying Refining seminar, which took place about a month ago now in London. It was the 10th edition of the ANR, as we call it, and it's every 2 years, so we've been going since 2005. This particular edition of the ANR, we had over 200 delegates, which was really pleasing. But also that we had a number of remote delegates. Those of you who were around 2 years ago, you know that we had a purely virtual conference, and we had a lot of virtual delegates joining. But we must admit, we were slightly worried that it had gone so well 2 years ago that people would think, oh, I'm just going to join remotely. But I'm pleased to say that that didn't happen. So we had over 200 delegates. We've had very positive feedback. One particular note of feedback was quite nice, was the best yet. So the sessions were very well attended. As always at the ANR room, people actually come to get their money's worth in the sessions, so they were well attended. But also the networking that took place outside the formal hall, judging from the enthusiasm with which people were networking, but also the volume of the noise in the networking sessions, shows that people really were happy to be out, happy to be meeting their fellow professionals, and really sort of really making the ANR what it is, which is a really welcome addition to the calendar for technical people who want to get out and discuss issues. The purpose of this webinar, now I'll let Mike say some things just now. The purpose of this webinar is to really sort of highlight some of the things that both myself and Mike really sort of made it clear why we're having these sessions. The highlights that sort of really you take away something, you think, I've learned something there, or the room has really had benefited from some important information that's being shared. So we're not going to cover every speaker, and I apologize if we don't mention all the speakers by name, but I would like to thank all the speakers for their participation. But what we want to do is we want to pick up on a few of the talks that we really felt made the whole ANR worthwhile. Before we go on to that, just like to point out that we did have fantastic workshop on the day 3 as well, excellent attendance. And I think over a third of delegates either attended the workshop or the Bureau Veritas tour in Whittam. So before I hand over to Mike, and I will promise, if you do have any ideas for tours next time, please get in contact with us, and we're happy to oblige. So Mike, really, what were the? Going to start off with the first topic, and what were the key takeaways from the conference?
Well, before we get into that, I just want to elaborate on something you said. That I mean, when I come to this these events, and I really learn something from every speaker, and I think that's valuable because everybody we're all facing the same problems, and everybody has a slightly. In some cases we have the same approach, in some cases there are slightly different approaches, but I learned something from every speaker who presents, and I think that's great because the quality of the talks have been going up. All the speakers stayed on time, everything just marched along very nicely, and I think we had some very concise well thought out presentation. So that credit to all our speakers for that. Starting things off, I thought if we look at the safety was the main theme for the conference, and we had an excellent keynote speaker from Leo Simpson from Metalor USA, who gave an excellent overview talk about safety as it applied to refineries, but it's also applicable to laboratories as well, in terms of going from equipment and design issues, moving through to attitudes and let's see. Sorry, I just had a notice on my screen that I wasn't expecting. To attitudes. Anyway, showing that whole spectrum of it's just not one thing. It's a variety of things. And then we found that the other speakers in the subsequent workshop elaborated on different parts of what Leo's talk was all about. We had speakers talking about the going fairly detailed into the equipment issues for a refinery. This is Ankur Goyal's talk. And then that more changed to other speakers elaborating on different attitudes and changes to that made up the whole safety program, but concentrating on little bits and pieces. And then we had an excellent safety workshop where we had 5 speakers talking, and it really worked out well. We just let when we were organizing this, we let the speakers decide what they wanted to talk about, and they all chose very nicely dovetailed talks that went from some, again, specific safety physical equipment features to attitudinal changes. And in particular, I'd like to call out Terence Nicosi's talk, which was really inspirational, where he highlighted Rand's refinery journey from a very high level of incidents, safety-related incidents in 1 year, and over a 5 to 6 year journey, that number shrank to almost a minuscule amount. And it was mainly due to a change in attitude, or at least he showed that it seemed to be attributable to attitude and a culture change within the organization. So that was quite amazing, and it was a really nice way to end the workshop on that. Neil, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I totally agree. And from both the keynote and then the first session through to the workshop, it became very clear that you can have all the PPE in the world, you can have all the safety rules in the world, but if you don't work on attitudes and people in the same program, you're still going to have accidents. So it's not just people, it's not just PPE and systems, it's everything holistically.
Yes, exactly. I think that was the big takeaway on that. And I think everybody, a lot of people were quite relieved to find that they're again, everybody's facing the same problem. They came up with new ideas, but also they're able to benchmark themselves against what other people are doing. So that was a really good way to go. I guess next there was a session on refining issues, and again, I was drawn to Chris Whalen's talk, who described the reclamation, refining, and assaying of a very small reclamations operation. And it was very interesting to see how in a very small, short talk, he captured many of the ideas that large refiners have to deal with, but just they're bigger and they just have more volume to worry about. But I think Chris's talk highlighted many of the issues that large refiners have to deal with. Everybody has to deal with in their operations. So I think that was a really good talk. And then Giovanni Calabria's talk about incorporating ESG into their decision making in their refinery in PAM was really interesting. And I think I like the last slide he landed on, is that they're now finding that ESG is key in every action taken, in every decision. They have to they make a conscious effort to consider that in the decision making, and it has just as much weight as financial. So I think that was a very interesting takeaway there. Your thoughts on the refining session?
Yeah, I really enjoyed the refining session, and it brings it home that this is the Assaying and Refining Conference. Do we want to get more participation from the refiners? I think so, but the talks that we had was certainly makes it relevant to the audience.
Yeah. And next we have the assaying, and of course, both Neil and I being chemists in refiners, it's a topic near and dear to our heart. And again, I learned something from all the talks, but in particular, we had a very great good talk from Jonathan Jodry talking about method development. He's a very good speaker and gave very good examples about how all the component parts that go into developing, validating a method to make sure it's fit for purpose, and the limitations of the method. And that was a very, very well thought out talk, I thought.
And also, it was voted the best talk of this.
Yes, exactly. And he continued. Jonathan's talks continued to be very highly rated, and no wonder. Then we moved on to Barbara Beck's talk as a follow-up to Geoforensic Passport, and I thought this was interesting to see how things have evolved. It's still continuing to be used in there, and she had some very good examples about some semi-refined material and some mineral material. And of course, the further you refine material, you lose a lot of that forensic information, but certainly it is available. Some information is available to help trace it, but of course, on the mineral side, you have lots of information, and you can use very simple tools like Flame AA and XRF to identify, to develop her geoforensic passport or information for these mine materials. And then if you need further identification, you can then go to other techniques to refine that identification. I thought that was an interesting way to look at it, and we can see this whole passport or fingerprint analysis develop over time. I'll be interested to see how that progresses over time.
Yeah.
I'd like to point out a talk by Elisa Cerrone, who it was a very a small change in her assaying procedure, where she used a vortex mixture to break up precipitated or non-dissolved particles in a silver analysis, and then with this treatment, broke up the particles, and then made the acid digestion that much more efficient later on. I think it was, I liked this talk because it provided a simple solution, but she just didn't stop there to show the effect. She went ahead and used SEM to understand why this occurred. And I think that made it a very elegant talk. And if everybody comes with a small change and understands why they've made it, then I think those type of talks are very valuable in terms of building up the common knowledge and providing a framework for small investigations that everybody can do on their own. I think that was an excellent talk. And of course, Martin Mohn's talk from Umicore on automation was amazing. And I think there was some envy in the room
Yes.
as to how to have that amount of wherewithal and funding for automation. But it's certainly a potential for way of the future as systems developed and as more people obtain that, the cost, of course, will go down. And of course, with the current software and hardware technologies, that's going to become better and better and more perhaps more readily available. So that was a really good addition. And then finally, I also want to give out a shout out to Stefan Zorn, who showed how who talked about silver determined by potentiometric titration, and really focused on the fact that if you don't have control of oxygen and your impurities in your the silver that you use to standardize the whole process, then you're going to have more errors or inaccuracies in your measurements. And I think that's a very good highlight for this conference, to show the things that maybe we're not thinking about and how that can affect us. So I thought those were, to me, were some of the highlights in the talk. Neil, any thoughts on you?
Just to pick up on Stefan Zorn's presentation, it certainly got the biggest reaction from the person sitting next to me, who probably wasn't aware that we don't report oxygen in silver. It doesn't contribute to the purity. He went, what? You don't? Yeah, so it was good education for somebody who didn't know about that. But Mike, I want to bring my highlights. One of my highlights of the assay session was your presentation on the limits of detection when you're analysing high purity material. So certainly the fact that you're offering a different view means, but you're not unique. How people deal with detection limits varies from organisation to organisation. And I think one of the purposes, again, of this conference is to make people realise that if we're not speaking the same language, we might both think we're getting the right answer, but it won't be the same right answer. So I certainly think there can be more discussions, and there's going to be more follow-up on how to treat limits of detection. Yeah,
and I think for higher purity materials, that's becoming more and more relevant. And I think it's a good, healthy discussion to have. And I think we also have to work with instrument vendors to adapt their software to that, so that things don't have to be brought offline and done at a particular method. We can choose different, have some options in there. This isn't. I think I think there's some interesting work ahead on that front.
Yeah, I mean, certainly with instrument suppliers, I think all of us have had interesting discussions on how their software calculates the final result.
Yeah, and I think, and again, it was, as I indicated, what I was talking about was one suggested way of looking at it. It is not the final way of doing it, and I think that will. I think we'll have to have further, as you said, we'll have further discussions about that in the coming months on that. All right. Next, we had vaulting issues. Neil, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. Again, it's the A&R, but we try and introduce topics and subjects that really are of interest to the entire supply chain, and certainly where you interact, where various parts of the supply chain interact. So in things like weighing, like your presentation on weighing, Mike, is very, very relevant. Certainly weighing in London as something that's changed quite a lot over the last few years, the movement to electronic weighing, for example, but we still have issues. We must make sure that we're using the right technique so that we agree on weight. Also, security features, they're coming. I think I said that. They're going to help the entire supply chain. It's something that a lot of the refineries are certainly doing a lot of work on. And the purpose of the LBMA in holding this conference is part of our remit to really sort of help the entire market and where there are challenges, where we can do education pieces, where we can do training pieces. That's why we're here. That's why we're doing this. So really, you know, the supply chain affects everybody. We have to get these things right. So that's what I'm taking about vaulting and vault training. And Tony, if you're interested, you know where we are.
Yeah, and that goes on to the sort of the last sort of theme areas is that how we deal with data. And there were several good talks, again, alluding to Jonathan's talk. He showed how he used real data and statistics to validate a method. And I think that was a good way to introduce, or it started us off thinking about that way. Madeleine came along and talked about how she can use big data and data analytics to view large stretches of data and get some valuable overview information about her whole process. And she's
Mike, yeah. Have you ever seen somebody so excited about data and presenting?
Yes. Yeah. Madeleine is a champion about this, and she's very enthusiastic about it, and it certainly showed. And then a colleague of hers, Elton Cubido, came along and also showed how they used statistics and data to identify and find the root cause of problem deposits within the Rand refinery. And I think that's also where we can, yes, there's experience and there's common knowledge, but then there's actual proof and data that you can pull out of your normal day-to-day operations to help you identify things very, very conclusively. And in this case, it pointed to low, small batches of gold that tended to be not sitting in the right place in the furnace to give a homogeneous melt. And I think that's a really good takeaway, using data to find that. Yep. And then we can't talk about assaying and refining without talking about sampling. And I think Mike Muiman's talk really was an interesting talk in terms of it challenges some of the standard sampling processes for fine bars, and matched it with current modern day theory of sampling practice. And so and that's a healthy discussion to have. Yes. And we'll see where this evolves, or if it causes any change. And I think it still also points out that sampling is a theme that we should be coming back to from time to time in this conference, and bring up and have more participation and more talks on sampling if we can possibly do that.
Oh, well, very much so, Mike. So sampling is certainly going to, if I have my way, it will certainly have its own session the next day. It's too big and important a subject not to focus on.
Yes, yes. And as I many times pointed out, sampling is the biggest source of error, and the laboratory can do a really good job on a really terrible sample, and get, but if it's not representative, it's not very useful. Anyway, so but those were my highlights. Is there anything that we've neglected to cover on that?
I just think shout out to there was a presentation from the lady from Iran, and that sort of highlighted that as much as this is a London centric conference, anybody from around the world can take part, even if you can't always be there in person. We've certainly got the technology now where we can expand this conference to get people who can't necessarily be in London either to present or to attend, but it means we can have a truly global reach.
Yeah, and as well, I was a big shout out to, well, it's great that we have the technology to do this. We hope people will attend in person, but also a shout out to the people that were non-English speakers, as many of our speakers are, and giving their talks in English. And I think that takes a large amount of courage and effort to do. And I also both for the speakers, and I think the audience was receptive and encouraging of the speakers, and I hope that that continues, and we'll have a lot more participation from around the world.
Yeah, the story I enjoyed was Stefan Zorn, how he gave his presentation to his children, and they criticised his English, but he still went ahead anyway. That's it's fine.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah. So they're the highlights. I mean, have we missed anything, Mike?
I don't think so. I'm sure if our listeners are hopefully they'll tell us if we missed something important. But I think we've covered all the high points. I think
So to summarize, please, if you do have any questions, ask them. If you don't have them now, we can always answer them later. But probably the main takeaway from me is reiterating the same point I made earlier, is it's like-minded people from around the world discussing and sharing ideas. Everyone has the same issues, but have come up often with unique solutions to their problems, and we can share and we can learn from each other. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. So that's my main takeaway from this. Very successful conference. Mike, thank you for all the work that you did in putting the program together. Again, thank you to Tamsin and the team. Shout out to Jamila, who really did a great job, and the AV team, the hotel, and everybody involved in the project. Looking forward to 2 years' time, where we'll get together and we'll discuss more good stuff.
Yeah. All right. I think we're...
So Tamsin, over to you.
Okay, lovely. So thanks very much for that. I shall just pull up my slides again. There we go. So so thank you very much for joining us today for the webinar. Before we finish, I just want to let you know about some of our upcoming training and events. So on the 18th of May, we have a members open house and Meet the Alchemist editor, which is planned around the Platinum Week. On the 23rd and 24th of May, we have an introduction to Loco London and how to use Loco London training. On the 23rd of June, we've got an introduction to responsible sourcing. And the 6th of July, we've got our annual general meeting. And not forgetting, in October, we've got our Global Precious Metals Conference, which will be held in Barcelona this year. For more information about any of those, please visit lbma.org.uk/events. And if you want to view any of our other webinars or the Vault training session from the conference, you can do so on our website at lbma.org.uk/videos. Again, thank you very much for joining us. If you're viewing this after the fact, you can send any questions to ask@lbma.org.uk and we'll forward those on to Michael and Neil. Thanks very much for joining us and have a pleasant day. Thank you.
Thanks, Tamsin.
Thank you.